The following is a hoop ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
What's happening once again, friends? It's Fantasy NBA Today, the podcast that fills your every podcasting need and all of your fantasies? That might not have been the best way to start it. I'm Dan Vespers. He's Vince. It is a fantasy show. You're Vince Miracle, the man chuckling at my idiocy. Vince, let's pretend that didn't happen. What's going on?
Not much. So I have a story to tell you because you're about to be a dad, and when you get to this point, this may happen to you during the potty training phase.
Oh no! All right, what you got?
All right, so my daughter's sleeping. My daughter Noelle, she's cuddling in the bed with me and my girl, and she's laying in there, and we're doing the potty training thing. She went to the bathroom before she went to bed. I thought everything was going to be good, and then in the middle of the night, I had no blankets on, but my back got so warm.
Oh no!
And it was like 4 a.m, and yeah, so I kind of woke up this morning with a warm back at 4 a.m.
So I'm gonna ask the question that I know everybody is thinking at home. What substance of the two available was the one on you?
The lemonade.
Oh, all right. Well, you know what? In that case, I'm taking the silver lining approach. It could have been worse.
It could have been worse, but it ended up being worse because she didn't make it to the toilet to do the other one. That's what happened.
No.
Like I had to give her a bath this morning at 4 a.m.
Oh my goodness. You know what? Someday, I'm saving all of these podcasts as MP3 files on my machine. Someday your daughter's going to be old enough where you can play this for her and you can say, "Look, sweetheart, we talked about the time that you peed on me and pooped on the carpet on a podcast that people are listening to across the country, where we were supposed to be talking about basketball, but we talked about poop and pee." So that's a fine start to your day.
I hope this makes people's days better because guess what? You could have woke up the way I did.
Yeah, you know what? You were sitting in traffic today. Vince has no pity for you because he got peed on. So there you go. By the way, that's your show, everybody. Thanks for listening. We honestly don't have a ton to talk about on the NBA front, but that's been the case for a little while. So the fact that we do have one truly notable story today does make it a better NBA news day. Before we get into that, Vince, just to go through the logistics here a little bit, it's low tide right now, so it behooves us to at least cover the ground that we have before. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation, hoop-ball.com, the website. I'm at Dan Vespers on Twitter. He is at VM Center on Twitter, and the website has a Twitter feed as well. That's at Hoopball Tweets. And there's a draft guide out right now, Vince. $11.99 the rest of this week. Am I remembering right from our last show?
You guys have till Sunday, $11.99 till Sunday. Then I believe on Monday afternoon the prices will be bumping up to $17.99. So get it fast and get it quick.
Yeah,
$11.99 is cheaper.
It's worth doing. I mean, honestly, for those of you that are in leagues, particularly paid leagues, if you're in a free league and you just like to win, I don't know that you need to spend money on something else. But if you're in a paid league, and I know a lot of us are in $50 or $100 or $250 leagues where the prize at the end makes a $12 investment now pretty negligible, especially if it's the type of thing that this draft guide is. And, you know, it's not going to guarantee you in the money, but it'll set you up right. And, you know, if you're in a good league, if you're in a tough league, especially 12 teams or more, getting your guys in the draft is colossal because those smaller leagues, there are guys floating around that you can pick up and drop at a moment's notice. But in the deeper ones, you need to have a firm base, and that's what this is going to provide for you. In addition to kind of giving you a good example of how you can do this on your own in future years. It's got a lot of information, and you can turn that into a learning experience as well. So with logistical stuff out of the way, Vince, massive injury in Milwaukee. I mean, this is from an actual basketball standpoint, this is pretty devastating for the Bucks, is it not?
Oh, this is extremely devastating for the Bucks, and it's really unfortunate for a guy like Michael Carter was. It's really unfortunate for a guy like Khris Middleton, who suffered that hamstring injury, will be out 6 months because he's going to need surgery. And even if he can return in 6 months, I know everyone's talking about, he'll be back by like March, and he could play like a few games. Like, no, I don't think his season's over. He's not playing a few games because he can start coming back in 6 months, but then it's also getting back into shape, being able to start playing, finding that touch. I mean, why roll him out there for 10 games?
Yeah,
so he's done for the season. And if you guys are in dynasty leagues and you have absolutely no chance of winning this year by looking at your team, try and find a way to go after him. I think maybe there's a guy who has Khris Middleton who was in the running or is in the running to win this year that could possibly use some help, and you can trade away a few assets. Nothing major because he's injured to go after a guy like Khris Middleton, but just from a reality standpoint, it's a huge blow to the Bucks season this year.
Yeah, it's a monster. This is a guy that really came into his own. He was a top 30 value in fantasy by the end of last year, which I think a lot of people would be surprised by that number. He averaged last season, I believe the exact numbers are 18.2 points per game, about 4 rebounds, about 4 assists, almost 2 steals a game, almost 2 3-pointers per game. He turned the ball over 2.3 times, which is higher than it had been in the past, but he became more of a focal point on that club that didn't really use a traditional point guard by the end of the year. And best of all, he shot 89% at the foul line and got there 4 times a game. So he helped you in a lot of categories. After a slow start last season, he got the field goal percentage up closer to where it needed to be. And he's a devastating loss. That's the way it's worth saying. And the Bucks are in a tight spot because from a reality standpoint, losing a guy like Khris Middleton really cuts them down. He's a good shooter. He's a nice mid-range guy who can stretch the floor and shoot the 3 a little bit. And when he's hot, I mean, he gets about as hot as anybody in the league. And you need guys like him, especially with someone like Antetokounmpo, who right now isn't a floor spacer, but man, he can get guys good shots. So, on a non-fantasy level, Vince, what do the Bucks do? I mean, we've heard rumors that they're already trying to find another 2 guard. How easy is that going to be for them?
It's going to be kind of tough because of the assets that they have. I mean, I know that Greg Monroe has been available. I mean, everyone kind of knows it. The Bucks have been pushing it out there through the media with Mark Stein and Mark Spears posting about how the Sacramento Kings are looking to trade Rudy Gay, and the Bucks have Greg Monroe on the market. I think Michael Carter-Williams is on the market, especially with the acquisition of Matthew Dellavedova. But if you're not looking at it from a trade side yet, and we'll get to the trades, but if you're not looking at it from the trade side, I think you're going to see a backcourt of Michael Carter-Williams and Matthew Dellavedova as your 1 and your 2. And then you're going to just run down the rest of your roster of Jabari Parker, Giannis, Greg Monroe.
Yeah, and that makes sense. From a non-trade perspective, I like that, Vince. Let's take a look at this roster now, and let's figure out how the Bucks plug this hole internally. Let's say that all of their efforts to find somebody are rebuffed, or maybe they just don't get the deal that they like. Where, like you said, there's a couple guys that are on the block where maybe they don't feel like they're getting good value simply because teams know that they desperately need somebody to fill that hole that Middleton leaves behind. So you can kind of plug it with pieces. Like you said, you could easily shift Michael Carter-Williams to the 2. He's a big, rangy guy. He doesn't shoot the ball well at all, which makes him sort of your anti-2 guard in that respect. But from a defensive standpoint, he certainly wouldn't have any trouble guarding opposing shooting guards. My question, Vince, is, does this actually open up, because the Bucks are, and maybe I need to set this up a little bit, because Milwaukee is such a long team, that's the way they've been built, guys with length, with long arms, ability to defend multiple positions, does this actually open up some time for somebody who doesn't defend very well, but darn it, does space the floor? And that's their recent acquisition of Mirza Teletovic. That's a guy that they signed this offseason who's technically, by the way, only 1 inch taller than Khris Middleton in real life, but obviously doesn't really slot in as a 2 guard. But you could move other bodies around and get him in there. Does he become fantasy relevant, or is that too much of a stretch?
I think he has the potential to see minutes because, like you said, but fantasy relevant, I don't know. I think really he's not that good of a rebounder. He's not that good of a defender. So really, you're just plugging him into your team for the 3-pointers.
Yeah, to score.
And how many shots he get just to score. And maybe he's more of a DFS play than a season-long play. But from a reality standpoint, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to throw a guy who's a fearless shooter out on the floor. But how much do the Bucks want to lose defensively is going to be a huge question. I mean, I think a guy like Rashad Vaughn can come in and be a strong presence at the 2 spot. He plays defense. He can knock down a shot. He's aggressive on both ends of the floor. And I think that he's someone that you might want to keep your eye on during the preseason and seeing how this whole thing plays out. But I think a guy like Rashad Vaughn, who's very athletic, again, who's aggressive on both ends of the floor and who's a willing shooter, could be able to come in there and see what he can do with this team if he gets 25 minutes a night.
So my concern with someone like Vaughn or with a lot of these other options is that what the Bucks are going to need in what they lost with Middleton, certainly the fact that he was at least a decent defender is a worthwhile point, but his 18 points a game was huge for that team because Antetokounmpo right now more of a dribble drive guy, Jabari Parker more of a mid-range guy, Greg Monroe generally around the basket, and then the backcourt, Michael Carter-Williams doesn't score at all unless he's got an open lane to the rim. Dellavedova, a little bit of a better shooter, but couldn't you potentially give up a little bit on the defensive side to get someone in there that can get you a couple of points? Does maybe someone like Jason Terry find a few more minutes in this mix without a trade again? We're looking at this from just a current Bucks personnel standpoint. What I'm seeing, though, Vince, in kind of scouring the Bucks roster right now, is that the loss of Middleton probably doesn't actually make anybody that wasn't already on the draft radar on the radar. That is, you're probably going to see guys that were looking at 8 or 9 minutes a game get bumped up to 15 or 16, where Middleton's minutes get split around a little bit, but nobody actually becomes a worthwhile grab.
Like I said, I think for me, it's just how much does Jason Kidd want to lose defensively? Because you can get into a scoring battle. I just don't think the Bucks have that many scoring options to really want to give up too much defensively.
Would you draft Rashad Vaughn if no trade is made?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, okay. So that's I think you and I agree on that. I don't think that there's anybody that steps up on this team and goes from being a non-draft to a draft guy. Do we agree on that point?
Wait,
Dan. Wait, what do you got over
Dan.
there? What are you pulling out of your hat?
I'm cooking up something over here in my brain. And there's a player we haven't even talked about yet. And I think maybe this injury has now given the Bucks a chance to be old school a little bit, a little different. And maybe they go big.
Are you throwing a Plumlee in there?
Big. I have a starting 5 potential of John Henson.
I'm so happy you said that name. But please continue.
Greg Monroe, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jabari Parker, and Matthew Dellavedova.
That is a massive lineup.
They're huge. They're big
ridiculous.
Guys, but
they're like the Monstars.
Play zone. I mean, this is exactly what this team has been prepping for with their length. I mean, you saw it. They like to switch because they have the length that has the ability to switch on and defend multiple positions.
Did you have Antetokounmpo or Parker at the 2 in that lineup?
I mean, either way, you can flip and flop those guys. I mean, they're talking about Giannis playing the point guard spot, so hey, have him be your shooting guard, then Jabari play the 3. I mean, however you want to look at it, but Matthew Dellavedova, Giannis, Jabari, Monroe, and Henson.
Yeah, they may finally have no choice but finally use John Henson for more than 12 minutes a game. I hammered John Henson in a good way. I mean, I like when Aaron and I were doing this show right out of the chute back in March, I talked about John Henson more than is healthy. So I am thrilled that you brought that name up. It does remain a little bit of a mystery how they continue to work that. But I guess, I mean, you kind of have to try it in that scenario, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, John Henson, we talked about it off air right before we came on. John Henson is one of my favorite basketball players in the NBA that doesn't get to play basketball in the NBA.
I love that.
He's my favorite guy that doesn't get minutes because he can do so many different things.
Dude,
he doesn't get the opportunity to do it.
His per 36 numbers are just are astronomical. It's crazy. The guy blocks everything. You literally cannot get a shot towards the rim if John Henson is on the floor. He probably would block his own team shot if he got spun around a few times and somebody pointed him in the right direction. I love him as a specialist. And so, yeah, that's a really good point, Vince. If this is a guy in Henson who was seeing 15 minutes a game last year, and without Middleton, everybody gets an extra 4 or 5 just sort of juiced around across the roster, Henson going from 15 to 20 is potentially draft area, where you got a guy that's no one's drafting John Henson before this injury, and now maybe you could slip him in there in the last few rounds and stick him on your bench. You know, if you're in a roto league that has a games limit or something like that, you don't necessarily deploy him right out of the chute, but you sure as heck don't want somebody else grabbing him if it turns out that he's blocking 4 shots a night. I love it, Vince. That's my favorite idea you've had on this show ever.
Oh, Dick, thank you. Stop it.
Of course,
Stop.
yes. All right, so wait. So you love playing around with trade scenarios, and we might as well just, have a little fun with it. Let's say that the Bucks are able to reach out and grab somebody, and they're able to get someone who's actually more of a wing player and fill the slot in a slightly more traditional manner. Who are some of your targets?
I know the one that keeps popping up right away, and I think it's kind of funny because these two guys were mentioned the most about being available and on the trading block is Rudy Gay of the Sacramento Kings. And the Bucks, they're looking for another wing player, and Rudy Gay could be that wing guy for him.
So who do they give up in that scenario?
See, that's the thing. It's like everyone's talking about a Rudy Gay, Costa Kufis for Greg Monroe and Michael Carter-Williams. I keep seeing that on my Twitter feed.
How do you play Boogie and Monroe at the same time? Can you? I don't know that you could.
See, that's the thing. I think Monroe comes off the bench, and he has to buy into a 6-man role. Because I still think, even with Monroe there, it would be Willie Cauley-Stein and DeMarcus Cousins with Greg Monroe coming off the bench.
Yeah, that's too much. That's too much lumbering ox in the starting 5 if you put both of those extremely big men on the floor together.
And I don't think Greg Monroe buys into being a bench player.
He may not have a choice.
I mean, if he buys into being a bench player, maybe I'm okay with it.
All right,
I just don't see it happening.
Let's ignore the logistics of it now. We're just having a good time on this show. Rudy Gay is a good choice. If you could make it work, he would be a decent fit. He's tall, he's long. I mean, he fits the needs of that Bucks team, and he can score, which again, to me, that's the biggest loss with Middleton going down is his ability to actually put the ball through the hoop, a hoop ball, as it were. Who anybody else that's jumping up at you as kind of a fun name?
Anyone else that's jumping at me as kind of a fun name? Give me a second here. I'm pulling up different teams.
You mentioned Tyreke Evans when we weren't on air, but we don't know if that guy's ever going to play a basketball game, so that makes it a little bit of a tough sell.
Yeah, and I looked over the Pelicans roster. I mean, I like Terrence Jones next to Anthony Davis.
You do or do not?
I do like that fit. Anthony Davis and Terrence Jones.
So they don't. I mean, again, then you're looking at a situation where a team probably doesn't want what the Bucks are selling. Going out and getting a guy that you need when an injury happens does put some extra pressure on the front office because other teams know that you're a little bit desperate. So all of these scenarios are tougher, and the Bucks are probably going to have to be okay with giving up more than they get back. You had mentioned a possible Toronto trade as you were sort of playing around with trade scenarios. Have you heard anything about any of these, or are we just having a little fun right now?
Like you said, this is just conversation Thursday. This
Yeah.
is this is
This is
trade
off-season
machine
time.
Thursday.
September,
Hashtag it.
everybody.
But no, I mean a trade that does make sense to me for Toronto. Although I do understand where you can see the naysayers for both teams, but Patrick Patterson and Terrence Ross for Greg Monroe and Michael Carter-Williams.
See, now in that scenario, the Bucks are probably giving up more than they're getting back from just a traditional basketball standpoint, but they don't really have much of a choice. If they want to fill that roster gap, they're going to have to give some things up, and to me, Monroe would be an interesting add in a place like Toronto. You've got Valanciunas who gets most of his shots either on the low block, but more than that, in pick and roll scenarios. And now you've got Sullinger as kind of a heavy set rebounding sort of shooter off the bench. He and Pat become a little bit redundant. So maybe you add a new wrinkle. But the other issue on that one, Vince, is does anybody really want Michael Carter-Williams right now? I don't. If I'm running a team.
I can see the Kings having interest, to be honest with you. I mean, he's 6'6", 6'5". He's long. He can rebound. He's a pass-first point guard. But I'm just not a fan of Michael Carter-Williams, and I think you guys can tell by the tone of my voice.
Neither one of us are. That's making this little game we're playing a lot tougher and a little bit more boring for those of you out there who are hoping that we'd say something earth-shattering, but we just don't have it because at the end of the day, Vince, you and I are both realists, and that does make pie-in-the-sky scenarios a little bit tougher to come by.
What about a team like Memphis? I mean,
who the hell's even on Memphis anymore?
Chandler Parsons? But I mean, I'm not saying they give up Chandler Parsons, and this trade scenario is probably completely ridiculous.
Maybe they should go try to pry Lance Stevenson off of these other jokers that aren't even paying him the veterans minimum.
Lance Stevenson just signed with the Pelicans.
I know, for pennies on the dollar. Could you imagine the Pelicans just sign him and then immediately flip him for somebody better? That's the ultimate GM move.
That'd be crazy.
It's a full Billy Bean on that one. Anyway, so the point of all of this is, as it stands, we base our thoughts on what the current situation is. And right now, Milwaukee does not have a starting two-guard. And Vince and I believe that those minutes will probably get divvied up to a number of different guys. It makes Matthew Dellavedova a little bit more interesting. It makes John Henson a little bit more interesting. And then guys like Teletovic, Terry, Vaughn, sort of keep an eye on how those minutes get spread around the team. You may see somebody take 8 or 9 of them, and that guy becomes more interesting.
I have the trade.
You do, huh?
I have the trade that happens.
Okay, what is it? You heard it here first. Remember this, by the way, when it happens. You heard it here first. The Miracle Man. I'm building this up as much as possible. I don't have a soundboard yet, but I will. By the way, that's another thing, Vince. I'm giving you time to. I'm really building the suspense on this trade. I am excited to announce that as this podcast moves forward, I have a soundboard program now, and we're gonna have a real good time with it. So what's the trade?
I can't wait for the someone else setting stamp noise.
Dude, I'm gonna get a stamp noise. I'm gonna get some Herbert noises on there. We're gonna have it's gonna be a field day.
Oh man, what's the Herbert noises?
Oh, you're just trying to make me do them. I'm not doing it. I won't do it for you, Vince. Anybody that's listening that has a child will stop listening to the show if I do the Herbert the Pervert voice. And that's our main demographic, is dads that are trying to escape their regular days. I'm about to be well aware of that. Okay, what's the trade? What you got for me?
I brought up Memphis. And
okay.
This trade may seem out there a little bit, but the team's getting old, right, Dan? This team's getting a little bit older. This Memphis team,
a little crusty.
They need some talent. Zach Randolph is going to be closing near retirement here soon. He's getting old. Maybe they need another big man. And maybe they want to preserve Zach Randolph's minutes now. So why not trade away Vince Carter, 1-year deal, Tony Allen, last year of his deal, and then you throw in a center like Brandon Wright, and in return you get Greg Monroe.
That's not the craziest thing in the world. Although adding Brandon Wright, now you've got John Henson and Brandon Wright that are both the same guy.
Exactly, but that means you can take one guy out and literally lose nothing when Brandon Wright comes in.
I'm not even sure that Memphis would need to give that much back, knowing that how much the Bucks want something to fill that spot. But I do kind of like splitting that spot between Tony Allen and Vince Carter. I mean, I guess the question is Memphis willing and able to part with some of these guys? And that's not the craziest thing in the world. And we'll see how it all develops. I'm gonna put put a pin in this one for now. And we will come back to it when we find out a little bit more about Milwaukee. Vince, another thing I wanted to talk about, and this won't take very long, is the plan for this show moving over the next couple of weeks, because we are about to hit the downslope to the season. This is, as everybody's well aware, the slow month for NBA. I guess we're a little bit fortunate today, and that's not maybe the right way to phrase it, but from a news standpoint, to actually have something happen was kind of nice for us, but obviously terrible.
Unfortunate truth about injuries in September. It gives us content.
It gives us a story, and for that I'm very sorry, because I had Khris Middleton last year, and that story sucks for Milwaukee, for its fans, and for the team, but it gave us something to talk about. Vince, next week we will begin the long-form mock draft, and we will walk you through it round by round. Vince and I are going to walk our way out into the fray. Yes, that is right. 2 members of the pantheon of heroes at Hoop Ball, Thunder Dan Bespris and the Miracle Man. We're going to just go out there and assume regular people identities and do mock drafts. Of course, I'm being facetious here. We're going to do some mock drafts with the general public. And we're going to bring those results to you guys here on the podcast. And Vince and I are going to break down every darn pick from 1 through probably 100. And that'll take us at least a couple of weeks, because we really want to give each pick its due. And maybe we knock out 1 or 2 rounds per show. But I don't want to really put that in stone, because if we end up taking a half an hour on one round, well, maybe that's just a quicker or a shorter show. If we blast through, we do 2.
This, Dan? How about we do this?
Sure.
How about, because you said we're going to do it with the public, why don't we do it with our listeners? So you and I will schedule out a day. It'll and then over the weekend. So when we come on Tuesday's podcast, we'll actually announce the date of the draft. And we'll just send out a link from your Twitter feed and my Twitter feed, and people can start joining in. We'll do a 12-team.
All right.
We can do a mock draft with them. And so if we ever get to the point where we can't do a round, the listeners that joined will actually know, and we can even post screenshots of the results or something like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Let's stamp it. Not the headache. This is the stamp of approval. We have so many stamps, Vince. I don't know what to do with all this rubber. And you know, and you're right, because over the next few weeks we will get more NBA stories, so that will cut into some of our podcasting time. But this will be a cool way to go through almost every player, and we'll give some thoughts, and it'll be a good way for everybody to get a feel of where the rest of the world sits, because if you try to bash in a few mock drafts the day before your actual draft, that can be a little bit overwhelming. Starting early, don't procrastinate, and we'll help you through that. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Vince, final thoughts before we send everybody off for a lovely weekend.
You guys subscribe to the Hoop Ball YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com, type in Hoop Ball, and look for the logo. Hit subscribe, because we are going to start revealing our Google Live chat shows. And for the premium providers, the people that are buying the draft guide and all the premium content for $11.99, or if you happen to buy a little bit later at the $17.99, we're actually doing private shows for you guys. 2 shows a week. Where we're going to be answering your questions live. You guys there's going to be a Q&A forum in there for a full hour. You guys submit your questions, and we're literally talking to you, the premium subscribers. For the live shows, for the people that do not buy it, it'll be 1 show a week, potentially 2, depending on how the production goes, but potentially 2.
Vince, do the private shows occur in the champagne room over at Hoop Ball HQ?
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
it does.
Now we're talking. All right, a sexy thought for everybody as we roll you into the weekend. Vince is beatboxing. Dude, I don't even have to do an outro if you keep that going. Give me a bass line again, Vince. Fantasy NBA Today comes to its close here on this Thursday afternoon. He is Vince Miracle. I am Dan Bespris. Get your soul on. bowl of soul with Vince and Dan. All right, I'll still do an outro. Thanks for listening, everybody, to our most ridiculous show in, what would you say, 2 months? Yeah, we'll go with
this is our final. Hey, this is our final show where we can actually make you guys laugh because it's about to start getting really serious with October right around the corner.
We're either making people laugh or we're confusing the hell out of everyone. But either way, as I like to say, if you and I enjoyed it, Vince, then I don't give a crap about anybody else. That's not true.
Someone else's headache.
Yes. Yeah, we're getting stamped. We're getting stamped with this one. He's Vince. I'm Dan. VM Center and Dan Vespers on Twitter. Hoop-ball.com is the website. Hoopball Tweets is the social media. Thanks so much for sticking with us today, folks. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. We're digging into the meat next week. We'll see you on Tuesday.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.